It's a trap!
Hey guys, welcome on another episode of Appetite for Collectibles on our segment that we have here today called Hey, I Was in Star Wars. I have the luxury of having the one himself, Tim Rose, and this is definitely not a trap. Hi, Tim. Hi,
I'm glad
Tim.
we
How you
got that
doing?
out of the way early on. Okay.
I know. I wanted to like joke around every time like we agreed on this. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm interviewing the guy who you know the infamous line that says it's a trap. But how are you doing today, sir?
Oh, not too bad.
So you are living in England, correct?
I've now lived in England for more years than I ever lived in America. I was brought over to England by the Muppets back in around 1980, and I've pretty much been here ever since.
But you were based off of was it Chicago, was it Illinois?
I was born there, yeah.
Okay.
I like to joke that I came from a town so small it only had one paved road, and that was the highway.
Oh my gosh.
Now, that isn't true, but I don't know if you know Meghan Markle, but she talks about my truth.
Yes.
Well, in my truth, as a little kid, the part of the town that I lived in didn't have paved roads. There were other paved roads, but my memory is in the summertime, the water truck would come through and it would sprinkle water on the roads to help keep the dust down so you could keep your windows open because it was so hot outside.
Oh wow.
So it's like the county watering your roads for you was definitely something from a time long ago and far away.
Yes. Now, like you stated, the Muppets is why you moved to England. Can you give me a brief description on that? Because I have so many friends that are huge Muppet collectors. And I recently saw the Jim Henson documentary that they had on Disney Plus. What was your experience with the Muppets?
Oh, well, I need to start by talking about your friends that are huge Muppet collectors.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who she has a whole I think it's either like the secondary bedroom all dedicated to the Muppets. She has all original figures, puppets, original artwork from Jim Henson. She recently I saw she went to Hollywood and took a picture with Jim Henson's his little Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, because we've dug through the loft and got out a load of stuff, and it's going on Dawsons Auctions.co.uk.
Okay.
30th of October.
I'll put that in the plugin.
One of my things I have there is the thank you, Tim, from Jim signed Labyrinth poster.
Ooh.
So if people like the Muppet stuff, there's a fair few things that are Muppety in there. So
Okay, I'll make sure to pass that along to them.
it's not all Star Wars.
No, it's not all Star Wars. So how was everything with working with Jim Henson? Was it a very fun experience?
I describe it as the days of King Arthur's court, where they say it was always sunny, never cloudy. But Jim was a very unique boss in that most bosses like to tell you what to do and get grumpy if you don't do it fast enough. And Jim actually really encouraged people to talk up because he realized he had a company full of very creative people. So he wanted as much input as possible from all these different minds about our ideas of how we'd like to do things. And then he would sit back and cherry pick the ideas. If you came up with a good one, he would give you the time and the budget to see it through to the end. So it was a very exciting place. We were a very dysfunctional group of people who were put in a playpen that had lots of resources, and we had a great time playing.
Now, because I've always been intrigued by it. How does one get into puppeteering? Was it just
No
something
idea.
that you dove right into?
Well, I always used to say I never got into puppeteering until I was at university.
Okay.
But then I'd said that my mother was always getting me to talk to people in the local newspapers and things like that. Oh, my son's home. You got to talk to the papers. And so I said I hadn't done any puppets until university. So my fifth grade school teacher showed up at the door with the photograph of the puppet show that I had done in fifth grade, which I had absolutely no memory of whatsoever. But so I guess they were always playing around in the background. But it was really when I was trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I really enjoyed graphic art. I discovered while I was at a small community college that I also wasn't half bad at acting. And I liked writing things and painting things and designing things. And while at the university, I discovered the puppets. And I didn't need to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up anymore because you had to sculpt things, you had to write scripts, you had to act the scripts out, you had to build the costumes. It was so all encompassing that I just felt like that was where I should be.
So it was like basically like a calling.
Yes. Well, I tell it as a story. It's on YouTube now with the Dawsons people I was telling you about. They shot some segments
Yeah.
of me talking about my past. And I was with the theater department at Ulster County Community College, and they were doing a Renaissance fair. So I decided I was going to do a Punch and Judy show as well as the plays I was acting in. And there was a mom and pop puppet company that used to perform at our elementary school, and they lived down the road from me. So I went down and knocked on the door and said, "Hi, I know you don't know me, but I was wondering if you could teach me how to make a puppet." And I expected the front door to slam shut in my face. But instead, they invited me into the house and they took me downstairs to the cellar, which was their workshops. And on the wall were, I don't think it'd be exaggeration to say, almost 1,000 marionettes in bags,
Oh,
because
wow.
they'd been doing this since the 1920s. And I looked around the room at all these beautiful creations. And then I looked at their house and I said, "So you can have this much fun making all of these things and still have a house that's this nice. Can you teach me how to make a puppet?" So they showed me how to do the puppets, and I did my little Punch and Judy show, which I'm glad they didn't have filming in those days because it was a steep learning process, shall I say.
Well, you have to start. I always see that you always have to start at like the worst to, or like you got to start from the bottom to make it to the top.
Yep.
Well, it would have been funny to kind of have seen you um doing your first puppeteering act. That could have been a segment that you could have made for yourself as, this is how I started and then this is where
Yep.
I'm at now.
Well, basically, when I made these puppet heads, they were so heavy that halfway through the show, my finger went numb and the heads kept falling forward. When I say bad, I mean, you wouldn't believe that I actually ended up doing this for a living if you'd only seen that show.
So the mechanics of making a puppet,
Yeah.
is it that the head has to be heavy or because
No, I
I've
was just that bad at making them. No, lighter the better. Definitely lighter the better. Yeah.
okay. And they have to be like more, like you have to have your hands to be able to open up, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's a hand puppet,
If it's a hand puppet, yes.
then I
Would
discovered
you
all sorts of.
puppets?
Yeah.
Would you say that you have a puppet that's one of your all-time favorites?
Of my own, no. I built a marionette early on, and I called him Buster. And when my dad died, I found him in their closet, and I remembered that I told my parents that this was the only grandchild they were ever going to have because I wasn't going to have kids. Well, after that, I had two girls, and now my girls have had two kids, so I'm a grandfather and all that. But it did amuse me that he was still hanging there in the closet. Their grandson was in the closet. And the guy from the auction house that was helping to sell some of the stuff at my dad's estate, he said, "Oh, that's a lovely marionette. You could probably get $200-300 for that." And I said, "What would you get if I signed it?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, people get all excited when I sign things." And I told him about the Ackbar stuff and that. And he said, "Okay, so sign it." So I signed the foot of this thing, and it ended up going for over $700 just because Admiral Ackbar had made it. So
He is an iconic character, I would say.
yeah, no, he's done me very good in my life. I can't complain.
Well, now speaking of the Admiral, I do want to dive into that. So, what was the whole process of the calling that you had received from Lucasfilm to become, Admiral Ackbar himself?
I got a call from my friend Mike McCormick, who was working in Phil Tippett's workshop building stuff for Blue Harvest Horror Beyond Imagination,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it was called pre-production. And he had been working on the character of Cy Snoodles, a nightclub singer, and he had made her as a classic marionette. And while up on the scaffolding, trying to see how she moved, because she was 5 foot tall at least and quite heavy, he lost his balance, fell off the scaffold, and broke his arm. So that rendered him unable to continue working or puppeteering on the movie. And he called me up, and I had just left Muppets myself, and I was sitting all alone in New York City going, all you've ever wanted to do was puppets. You're working for the biggest puppet company in the world, and you quit working for them. Are you completely insane? So I was still beating myself up when he called me and said that if I could get out to California, maybe I could take his place in the workshop. So I went out there, and they liked my interview, and they did give me a job, and I replaced Mike on the movie. And he was meant to be puppeteering Salacious Crumb, so I took that job over. And I decided with Cy Snoodles that I didn't want to fall off any scaffoldings, so I completely redesigned her as what I called a reverse string marionette. So marionettes are held up on strings.
Yeah.
Cy Snoodles was held up on bungee cords, and then I used my control lines, my strings, to pull her down to the floor. So I was actually underneath her and holding her down on the floor as opposed to trying to hold her up on a scaffold.
Oh, wow. So is you were able to balance her even better without you actually injuring yourself as well.
Yeah. And the
Okay.
other thing, marionettes can be very floaty and lyrical because they're hanging on strings.
Mhm.
But because I could pull her down to the ground, one of the first things I realized is, ooh, I'm really excited by this because she can stomp her feet. Marionettes can't stomp their feet. It's one of their
Yeah.
limitations. And yeah, I I invented that form of puppeteering, which I called a reverse string marionette. And I don't think I used it again for another 25 years or so, but it's just I I'm an animatronic designer and a performer. So, as opposed to getting stuck into one way to do anything, I always just invent something that works for that thing.
Yeah.
Now, we can carry that into Ackbar as well. I had been working on, before going to California, Phil Tippett, I'd been working with a guy, Rick Baker. He'd done American Werewolf in London and all that stuff. But
Yes.
we were doing Greystoke, Lord of the Apes.
Okay.
And I was working with his California boys. But you asked about working for Jim Henson. I was working with them right after leaving the Muppets. So I was now working with Phil Tippett in California, and this character Ackbar came up. And I started by saying, "So who is this character?" And Phil said, "Oh, he's another background character that appears later in the movie." So I said, "Does he appear in any of the scenes that Salacious Crumb or Slice Noodles does?" And he said, No, he's all on his own in a separate bit. I said, "Oh, so can I puppeteer him as well?" And he said, "Sure." So that was my audition for Admiral Ackbar that you asked about earlier. And also, I looked at him, and we had been working on this full body suit version, but it's very hard with a person's head inside the costume to do an awful lot of movement with controls because it was mostly cable control. You know, servos were only just starting to come into use and that sort of thing. And so I went to Phil and I said, "Phil, God, I got this idea about this character. You know, it's like, well, I think we should make the close up a head puppet." And then I stood there waiting to be fired yet again. But Phil said, "Well, if you think it can work, then give it a try. And if it doesn't work, then you're fired." You know, so I built a close up of Admiral Ackbar, which is a hand puppet who has more screen time when you see Ackbar on screen than the full body suit ever did. So
Now I'm definitely gonna pay attention to all the scenes, like rewatch the movies and look, and then I'm gonna go, "Oh, that's a hand puppet."
yep.
See, I
I'm
always
down
love these.
inside of his chest and I'm doing his mouth
Yeah.
Muppet style like that. And
See, I always love doing these like behind the scenes interviews because once I do these, I always reflect and go back and watch different Star Wars films. And then I'll notice all the little, it's like little hidden Mickeys. I'll find all the little mysterious things that we just talked about. So that's going to be one thing I'm going to be doing now is watching every
okay.
segment of Ackbar.
Well, if you want to see Slice Noodles, you got to see the original movie because
Yes.
George replaced her with CG straight off.
Yes. Which I
And
didn't like that one.
well, she, even with all my efforts, reverse string marionette and everything, she was incredibly hard to perform well. All I had to do, if you caught a string on the edge of the train tracks, the floor had her dance routine cut into the floor so we could move forward and move backwards down another set of slots and do the whole dance routine. But if you caught one of the lines on it, all of a sudden she just starts shaking and go completely out of control, and you'd have to start again. And we got it to where we could do a really good performance, 1 in 12 takes. But when we actually turned over on camera, they did the first take, and the director said, "Moving on." And I came out from underneath saying, "Oh, please, God, no, don't make that. After all the work I did on this thing, don't make that what the world sees." And he gave me take 2, but take 2 still wasn't take 12.
Oh, wow.
So on the one side, I can understand why George did it. On the other side, if he had been like Jim Henson, who, if you thought you could do it better, he'd give you 30 takes until you got the one you said that's the best one. And then that's what he would always put in his films. He called them magic moments. And but I only got 2 takes with Cy, so you never got to see her as good as she could have been.
Well, man, that sucks because I that would have been cool to have witnessed. Now, with building the hand puppet for Akbar, how long did that take to build?
Couple of weeks. I mean, we're working on all sorts of things, and the it wasn't just Ackbar I was working on at the time, but pre-production, I was there for about 4 months, I guess, before we came to England.
Okay. Yeah, so you
I
were
have a really good story about that, though.
what of going to England?
Well, sort of, yeah, of being in England.
Do tell.
As I said, the original Ackbar, he was a full body suit for establishing shots and then a hand puppet for the close up stuff. Now you fast forward to Force Awakens, where we now have all the servos and the computer backups and all this sort of thing, you know. They brought me in to life cast my head so that they could do the carbon fiber helmet, which goes inside Ackbar to hold up all the 38 servos around the outside of him and make him move. So I just said, "So, how are you guys getting on with Ackbar? You know, he's a tricky character to build, isn't he?" They said, "Yeah, we can't work out how to do his eyes. I mean, what did they do with him? You know, all they had was photographs, so there was no way to look what they actually did." And I said, "Well, what you ought to do is you ought to get in touch with the guy that made the eyes, and I bet he could tell you how he did it and explain how it works, you know." "Oh, have you got his email? Have you got his contact details?" So I left it for a good couple of beats. And all these guys have worked on me with several things, so they knew me okay, you know. And I said, "Yeah, it was me, assholes."
That is too funny. They were probably like so excited to obtain this information and like get a hold of the individual who made the eyes for Ackbar. And
And
then
they were
lo and
torturing
behold,
him by putting plaster all over his head and alginate, you know.
yeah. And lo and behold, you're standing right in front of them with the key to the answers.
Hmm.
Good job. Good job.
But that new Dark Crystal TV thing, that was the same way.
Yeah, I would think that with stuff like that, when you're especially when it's a huge gap in age, when it comes to building all that stuff, I would think that they would have like an archive of how everything was done, or exactly how you recommended, that they would contact, the original, like the original, the OT
Yeah.
guys, to, the new guys, to ask the OT guys like, "Hey, how did you do this stuff?" Because at the end of the day, you still kind of have to go back to the basics to be able to get to what you need to have done.
The problem is that when you're doing it, you're running at such a high speed. You basically do things that take about 6 months to make, but you got to do them in 3 weeks. And so the time to what was the word you used to reference them, to put all the, you basically did it as you went along, and there was nobody actually logging up what was being done.
Yeah, see, they should have archived all that stuff.
So there, yeah, there
Wow,
is there is a massive information dying one at a time now.
that's yeah, that sucks.
That,
These are things that the when I've had a few interviews with some of the OT guys, you know, it's one of the things that I've sat there and I've like thought about after the interviews, that like a lot of this stuff is not archived. And a whole segment can be done, like, even, like there's a TV channel that it's called Vice City, and they're always doing different interviews, like the behind the scenes of certain things.
hmm.
I know recently, a couple years back, they did one on Marshall Lucas. And I feel like they should do one like that with like ILM, a little bit more in depth with like the puppeteering that went on with Star Wars and the mechanics, and like stories like this is phenomenal, because then, you know, later on in life, if certain actors or directors want to, make these films, they know who to contact, for the archives, to help them, to build something, as opposed to, second guessing or figuring it out on their own.
Just talking to my friend John Coppinger, and I said I've always wanted to do a book, and it would have two front covers. And the first front cover would just be the story of my little roller coaster ride through life, and the second front cover would be the history of animatronics.
I think you should.
Well, but then I said, but the problem is, um, I realized I was reading Jim Henson's autobiography, and what I really loved was that I kept bumping into things on it that I remembered from the videos I saw when I was working there. But most of it I was able to look up on YouTube. So I could read about it, but then I could watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And for animatronics, for me, it was all about the movement. Now, the problem with the book is it has no movement in it. So I thought, well, okay, should it be a podcast then talking about animatronics so you can play all the clips and, talk about it, but then show what it was that you were actually doing at the time and that sort of thing. And to really get it, to understand it, I think, yeah, you can talk about it, but you have to actually see it.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, you should do a
it's
podcast. Talk about the different animatronics.
profession.
Yes.
If you
And
want to
I
work a 40-hour week and then have time off, go do something else. Don't work in the movies. I thought I was going to get to do my swan song. It was for Britain's Got Talent TV show.
mm-hmm.
And my friend Paul Zerden, he actually won America's Got Talent with his puppets. And all of the bits that he did to win America's Got Talent were all animatronic stuff that I had built for him. But he wanted to do this thing for Britain's Got Talent. And it was going to be a Victorian doll that had captured a little girl. She was like the doll. You thought when you saw them come on stage, it was going to be a little girl doing an act with her doll. But it turns out that she is the slave to the doll, and the doll is the one in control and doing the whole act.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was going to be a chance for me to put 40 years of animatronic knowledge all into one thing and have a swan song and show people what could really be done with these things.
Now, do want to ask because I've asked this to a couple of people and like they always get super excited about this. How was it like knowing that your characters were made into actual action figures?
Well, um, my favorite one, the one that really got me going, was when they did Ackbar as a Lego figure.
Yes.
Because I had grown up as a kid always playing with Lego. So I held up this little guy and I looked at him and I said, this is immortality, because when I'm long gone and in the grave, kids are still going to be playing with him. So I just found that so cool.
Yeah. His Lego is actually kind of cool because it's like the big head and then you've got like the little body.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah,
that's
I've got Guido next to me, next to Boba Fett, and it's basically the old guys. Guido and I are still there, but Boba in the middle is not still there anymore. And
yeah.
when Jeremy was around, he was my mentor for conventions. He was the best. So
I didn't get to have the luxury to meet Jeremy, but I heard nothing but the best things about him. What is it called? I interviewed Dickie Beer and got to actually hang out with him at a convention in Texas because I'm friends with his son-in-law. And the stories that he spoke about Jeremy were just awesome, and everyone said nothing but the greatest things about him.
he was always trying to give the fans 110%, to the point of towards the end, he didn't even sit at his desk. He stood in front of the desk, so there was nothing between him and the people who wanted to meet him.
That's
Now, I
awesome.
think that's really cool, but I still sit down anyway because it's a long old day, so it's
Yeah, you got to have some back support, signing all day. Have somebody bring you water and coffee.
Yeah. Do you want to know a real story?
Yes, tell me a real story.
There was a period in time, it's when I sort of got fed up with being freelance, because you could make good money, but then you didn't know if it had to last 3 months or 6 months or a year until you got another job. And so it created a tension. And I just wanted to be like normal people and have a job with a weekly paycheck. And then I could set a budget and I could go to work and come home and just have the rest of the time off. But out in the real world, the first job that I found that I was doing was working as a maintenance man for Bovis Homes.
Okay.
And my mother was still alive at the time. And I said to her, I said, Mom, I feel so guilty because these people all come and they get all excited and, oh my God, we're meeting Admiral Ackbar and all this sort of thing. If they knew they were meeting the maintenance man for Bovis Homes, would they still want to meet me? And she said, it isn't about what you're doing, it's about what you have done.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I'd been given a gift. I could make people happy. And that's what I try to do as much as possible.
I like that. That was really nice that your mom said that.
Oh, she's cool. She was a cool lady.
Yeah. Who between your parents, between your mom and dad, who were which one was the one that pushed you more into, like pursuing, your dreams? Was it your mom?
Oh no, no, she got really upset. She wanted me to be an architect, and she got very upset that I ran away to the circus instead. So
Yeah, you basically did run away with the circus.
yeah. And my dad never pushed anything at all. He was just always my dad.
I like that.
But I did get a university education and graduated with a acting and directing major with a minor in art. But the animatronics I did were because my dad was in the model airplanes. So I already knew how to plug in servos and run machinery and do all that sort of thing. So it's what taught me. They gave me my career. It wasn't anything I learned at university. So
So basically, it's something that was your dad's hobby kind of
became
transferred
my
over.
career. Yeah.
Yeah, transferred over to you and made it into your career.
Yep.
Oh, wow. See, little things always, enter in people's lives, and that's what, guides them into, what their destiny is supposed to be.
Yes. This is your destiny. Yes.
Now, I know that in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be doing like, what is it? You're going to be coming to ICC, which is the Nashville Star Wars convention.
Mhm.
And you're going to be there with a whole bunch of like your original trilogy friends, which I'm super excited to meet you in person. Is there any other conventions that you're going to be doing in the next couple months?
I'm looking at the calendar as we speak. They they're in the UK.
Okay. There's there's a lot of UK Star Wars fans that I've met, that I'm always constantly chit-chatting with. And like anytime Star Wars, anything related that I always hear about, it doesn't matter if it's in the US or in the UK, or hell, if it's been in like other, Latin American countries, I'm always posting them on Instagram because it's nice to, inform people, like, hey, I don't know if you live here, but this person's going to be here. You should definitely check it out.
Mhm.
But I know I'm going to personally get a plaque for you to sign for me, but I'm going to try to get one that's going to have like all the characters that you've had on there, not just Admiral Ackbar, because, that is really cool that you've done Admiral Ackbar. You've also, did Sly Snoodles. You've also done, Salacious Crumb. Did Dark Crystal, which is probably one of my mother's all-time
The
favorites.
Treasure of Skeksis, yes.
And how was that working on Dark Crystals?
That was great fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was very hard work, but very rewarding.
Now, if you can pick one of your favorite characters that you have done, which one would it be?
Oh, I always answer that the same. The one I'm proudest of is Howard the Duck.
I actually have the VHS tape for Howard the Duck.
I don't have a VHS player. I was just looking in the loft for this auction. I was trying to find my Howard the Duck crew jacket, which I still have,
Oh, wow.
because I saw one of those go for over $1,000 on eBay in America. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll put that in the auction, But I put it away so safely, I can't find it now.
It's like probably buried in the walls. You got to like tap, see if you find stuff. Now, do tell me about this auction that you have. I know you brought it up earlier in our segment, but do tell more information about this auction so I can make sure to let others out there know if they're interested in, acquiring some awesome memorabilia.
Yes. Yeah, no, you can't see it.
Okay, I can see it.
It is Dawsons Auctions.co.uk. So they run it all on the internet, but they're a very big company. And what I'm proudest of was they interviewed me and edited 3 segments together that they put on YouTube. And I must say, it's the best stuff I've ever done. If I do say so myself. No, I said that you made me look like a really nice guy. They said, no, you are a really nice guy. And I said, oh, I wish I was. No, I'm not. So.
All right. So we're going to be getting items for auction from Star Wars, from the Muppets, Howard the Duck, anything from Dark Crystals. Possibly. We'll see.
There were a couple of things. There was a limited edition poster, and okay. I can't remember everything. There's a lot of stuff there. So
well, I'm definitely gonna, when we're done here, I'm definitely gonna check it out and definitely let a lot of my friends know that it's coming up so they can buy it, because I have a lot of buddies of mine who love to go on any of those auction websites and buy. I think owning memorabilia like that, it's you're taking with you a piece of history. So you're capturing the moment even though you weren't there.
The one that I like the best is I had a have you ever seen the Yoda baseball cap?
Yes.
Green hat with ears?
Yes.
Well, they originally started making those back in the 80s. And I picked one up then. And then I came back to England, and the very next thing I went on to was Labyrinth. And of course, Frank was one of the executive producers on Labyrinth and everything. But within the Muppets, you were sort of picked on if you had gone to work on Lucasfilm, because it was considered going to the dark side.
Oh, wait, what? The Muppets? So working for this side was basically like the Jedis, and then if you went to go work for Lucasfilm, you were with the Sith?
Yeah, it was working for the dark side, yeah. So anyway, to wind Frank up, I put on this Yoda hat, and I walked on the set on Labyrinth. Take that off right now. He didn't appreciate that at all, But I took it off, and although it wasn't done you did not do it in those days. I don't know, but I did anyway. And I asked him to sign my Yoda hat. So he did sign it for me that day. So
because he probably thought it was really funny that you showed up on set, even though he was like, take it off.
Oh yeah, no, we all enjoyed making fun of each other. Have you ever seen Muppets Christmas Carol?
Oh yes, I own it on VHS.
Okay, well, the main puppeteers, when they were doing the Muppet Show, they did about 4 or 5 characters each. But when they were doing the movies, if 2 of their characters appeared together, then they could only do one of the 2, and you got to do the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So in when Fozziwig was doing his big Christmas party, and Piggy was there. So Frank was doing this scene with Piggy, and I had to do Fozziwig. So it was just like a crowd scene when you looked over Piggy's shoulder, you know, and all the people there and everything. So I was trying my best to do what I thought Frank would do with Fozzie in this situation. But after the first take, he came over and he goes, Tim, too much, back it off. So I said, oh, sorry, Frank. I was just thought I was doing what you would want me to do, you know, and everything. So he did it again, and I just took all the movement down 30% and everything, you know, started doing it again. And he came at the end of that take, said, Tim, way too much. Take it down, take it down. And he did this for 2 more takes. And finally, he wasn't telling me what to do. He was just telling me what not to do. I got so frustrated, I decided I'm going to ruin the next take. And when we did it, and everybody's dancing around to the music and watching Miss Piggy. And right in the middle of them is Fozzie Bear, and he's there like he's on a stand. He's not moving at all. And at the end of the take, he comes over and says, Tim, that was perfect. That was just what I wanted you to do. In other words, he didn't want anybody else doing his puppets.
That is too funny.
But that was what it was like working with Frank. You know, you had to accept a lot of his unique sense of humor.
Yeah, I've seen interviews with Frank, and you know, he's one of those that I've always said I can never tell if he's joking or being serious. It's a very mysterious you know, demeanor he carries. So it's like I don't know if he's joking or not, but you know, I would always, if I worked with him, I would probably second guess all the
Oh
time. Like,
yeah,
wait
no,
a second, is he mad at me? Is he joking? Is he mad?
he can totally lacerate you and never even crack a smile. He's
Yeah, I work with a couple people who are like that, and then sometimes I'm always looking at them like, wait, do they hate me? Wait, no, they like me. They smiled.
I got so excited when he came back to do Yoda again for The Last Jedi. And I was a bit upset when I saw it. I wasn't allowed to come into the room while he was working or doing any of that. But when I got to see it like everybody else did at the cinema, I was a bit upset with Yoda's glow because it was the puppet, but it made him look like a CG.
Yes.
If you know what I mean, you know, and it's like, but then Yoda came forward and he bonks him on the head with his cane. And I said, that was Frank. That was the two of them having fun. You know, that was CG would have never thought to do that.
Yeah.
So it was fun
I also feel
watching
with
the master once again. But
I also feel with puppeteering, you get to see more of a realistic movement. I've never been, you know, I own Star Wars films in different segments. I have all the original films still on the original VHS tape that it first came out. I have the digital remastered one. I have then, you know, the VHSs and I mean the DVDs, and then going into the Blu-rays, and I also own the 4K ones as well. And there's been certain scenes that I've watched where you get to see certain characters and how their movements have changed. Like when they do Jabba the Hutt, he looks completely terrible as to what they have him now. It's very CGI and it looks very fake, even though when you watched it in the original, you know, it was one massive, you know, puppet or whatever you want to consider it, or animatronic, but
it was a puppet.
it looked more real seeing him as a puppet as opposed to when you see it CGI. You can kind of see that grainy looking, you know, filming on the bottom of every character when you can tell it's CGI.
Yeah.
And you know, being someone that loves films, I'm continuously watching movies. You know, I love critiquing them for different, you know, different reasons. I feel that films shouldn't continue doing CGI. I think that they should go back to the original mechanics because that's what a lot of people like to watch. They like to go back and look at the originals.
Well, Neil Scanlon set up down in Pinewood, and they're building a lot of animatronics for the spin-off stuff. So animatronics is, they're finally starting to listen. And I realize that the animatronics is better than it ever was. But what's happened is that there's nobody around who remembers how to shoot animatronics.
No. Or anyone who has been around has taught anybody, of this generation how to shoot animatronics. And hence why, back to our previous conversation, I said, things like this should be archived, because, there could be, a film student out there, who wants to get into animatronics or puppeteering, and they grew up looking, at stuff that you did, or other animatronics or puppeteers have done as well. And they like their specific style, and they want to have, their career be that specific style. They're not going to have somebody out there teaching them this because it's not archived.
Yep. What I love in my old age is everybody knows about animatronics, but nobody knows where it actually came from. And I'm not the oldest. There's people older than me doing animatronics, but I am the first animatronics designer because Jim wanted to get his New York guys over to England. We were doing The Great Muppet Caper and Dark Crystal and all these movies, and he wanted to get his guys over to work on these movies. And the Brits wouldn't let us come over because they said, no, you're putting British people out of work. You got to hire British people. You can't bring Americans in. So this British producer said, Jim, what you need to do is you have to give your guys a job title that doesn't exist in the UK. So we thought about it a long time, and it was Faz Fazakas, who was my boss at Muppets. He came up with it. He said, well, let's call them animatronics designers. And we all got our work permits because there were no animatronics designers in the UK, because there were no animatronics anywhere in the world, because we made it up to get a work permit. So go figure. But it was something that needed a title.
Yeah.
It's just, as with all these things, how did you audition for Ackbar? The reality, the weird kind of
how the universe
flow
works.
of just things going in the right direction. I call it a critical mass with animatronics. A lot of people always tried to keep things secret, and I never tried to keep anything secret, because I said, as this becomes more popular, unless there's enough people doing it to keep it going, it'll die under its inability to keep up with demand.
That's true.
You know what I mean? As it was growing, anybody who wanted to know how to do it, I told them how to do it, because the more of us were doing it, the more there would be. It wasn't people taking jobs away, except that's not entirely true. I did a film, Return to Oz, and I remembered recently thinking about it. And by this point, we had been over here for 12 to 15 years. I don't know exact dates. I was too busy working to keep track of all that stuff. But I now had a wife and 2 children, and I was trying to get a job on Return to Oz. And I was walking through the workshop to go up the stairs to the art department to talk to Norman Reynolds and ask for a job. And I looked around this workshop, and every one of the guys already working and sitting at these benches were guys that I had taught animatronics to.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't get a job on the movie. So, do you want to hear the rest of the story?
Yes.
It's very funny. So I go up to Norman. I said, Norman, I really need a job. And he says, we've been having a hard time with these characters called the Wheelers. We don't know how to make them work. If you could work out a way to make them work, then maybe you could get a job on the movie. So I went, oh, great, and he gave me the script. I read it all up. Hands on the hands, wheels on the hands, wheels on the feet. How do you stop them from going spread eagle? Put wheels on your hands and your feet and then try to stay up. You just go flop face first.
Yeah.
So I worked out the whole thing and I stayed up all night and I drew up the entire set of schematics of what you would build and how you would control the wheels for these people to actually do this performance. And I brought it into him next day and I handed it to him and said, whatever you do, don't show this to John Stevenson, because John was working on it, but I didn't want him to think I was trying to take his job. I didn't want to take anybody's job. I just wanted a job myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to upset John. Handed it over, knew I'd solved the problem, waited to get the call to come to work, and it didn't come. So I went back again about 2 weeks later and said, "Hi, Norman, still out of work. Love to have a job on your movie. But he was in a meeting with John Stevenson. The door was open. I could see him in there. And they were having a very heated discussion. So I just sort of disappeared down the hallway to wait till that was finished. And I went past John's office, and on his desk in his office were a set of prototypes for my designs for the wheelers. So as I had nothing better to do, I strapped these things on and tried them out and went, well, I would have built this a little bit better than this. The ratchets on this aren't really that hot and everything. But as I got more used to it, I started rolling up and down the hallway. And then I got even better and I went shooting past Norman Reynolds' office down to the end of the hall. And I turned around and I came shooting past again and I waved to him as I went past the door, and that. And it turned out that John Stevenson had been in there telling him that these designs that Tim Rose had done were a load of blah, blah, blah. And there was no way a human being could possibly do that. And they were going to have to body cast the performers and put them on gurneys and just pull them through the shot on lines. Well, I got a job on the movie after that. But John Stevenson spent the rest of his career trying to make sure I never worked again. So,
Oh my gosh. That's too funny. Well,
so
you did work.
I did. I did work. I worked a lot on that. I ended up doing TikTok,
Okay.
and there was 5 of them, but one of them is in what's it called, Lucasfilm Ranch. George has got him in the
Yes.
solarium there at the ranch, and they really liked him. So
Yeah. And now you got one that's archived with the ranch.
yeah,
Well, Tim, I don't want to keep you much longer. I truly appreciate this interview. I know that we said that we can find you in your next convention, which is going to be in Nashville. And then you're going to have a bunch in the UK. I know people can go on your website, which is admiralackbar .co.uk,
and my wife always puts up
like all the news and
convention
stuff like
everything.
that. Well,
I'm
it's
really looking forward to coming to Nashville because they were just so kind about inviting us there and everything. And
I'm super excited to getting to meet you, and like the owners of ICC are probably the nicest, most genuine people you'll ever meet. They base off their conventions for the fans, and it's not just a propaganda type of money style thing. They really just like to have the fans meet their favorite characters. And like I said to you earlier before, the fact that they're getting a whole, they're doing a whole con this year with all the original trilogy actors. It's just mind blowing to me. Every week that they're announcing guests, I'm just like, who else are they going to get? I'm like, wow.
with Paul Blake and we meet at a convention. You're still here.
Oh, that's so mean.
I have to not. I when we do our little talks together on stage,
Mm-hmm.
I always do something like, he's a lot older than I am. I was a teenager watching him in the movie before I ever even started doing movies. So that's how old he is. Now, Paul's have you ever met Paul?
No, I'm super excited to meet him too.
He's a lovely man. So
That's awesome. Well, like I said, I'm super excited to meet you guys at ICC. And for anybody who's coming out to Nashville in October, this is definitely going to be a con you're not going to want to miss. It's a lifetime opportunity of meeting some of these original trilogy characters, in the flesh, getting them to sign some of their stuff, and just overall interacting. Because I know it's either the second or third day of ICC, they do this thing called it's like an after hours party. And if you are a guest at the hotel that they host the con, they do this thing at like 8 p.m. where all these vendors come out into the lobby of the hotel. And, I went years ago and a lot of celebrities were just hanging out, getting dinner, getting drinks, and like chit chatting with some of the, the guests that came, and, the fans that came. And at one point I was sitting next to Julian Glover was right next to me. He was drinking a bottle of wine, and I just like happened to look over and I was like, "Oh, sir," I was like, "I'll get you the next glass that you want." And we just sat there and chit-chatted about Indiana Jones and Star Wars for about half an hour. And then, I left him be because, I didn't want to disturb him as he was enjoying his evening. But it's like I said, it's one of those conventions that you go there and, get to have fun meeting some of your favorite celebrities.
Yeah. We did had a celebration in Japan, and they did one of those. They got us up and they introduced us all on stage, but it was this evening thing. And then they said, "Well, we sort of told the people that you would go and mingle with them." And so,
Well, I'm truly honored that both you and Tia said it was okay that I could interview you today. Literally, when I got the email from Tia, my eyes started watering up because I was just like, "Oh wow!" I was like, "This is so iconic."
well, I hope I haven't disappointed you then.
No, not at all. And like I said to you, I'm super excited to meet you guys in person, and get to actually like interact like this. You have no idea how happy I am about this interview. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. And may the force be with you.